The first time she called the cops on me, I was mid-flip on a set of baby back ribs, tongs in one hand, cold beer in the other. The smoke wasn't even thick, just that low, lazy swirl that tells you something good is happening. I didn't see her at first, but I heard her. "Excuse me, this smoke is entering my upstairs window and triggering my asthma," she shouted over the fence, as if I were conducting a forest fire, not a Saturday barbecue. I'm Mark, 36, newly moved into a cul-de-sac just outside Denver. Suburban, sleepy, and, until then, pretty peaceful. I bought the house last fall, freshly divorced, needing a clean start. I figured a quiet neighborhood, good schools nearby in case I ever got shared custody, and enough yard for a grill and a couple Adirondack chairs would be enough. If you're into stories where things slowly spiral and neighbors turn into mini dictators, you're going to want to stick around. Drop a comment if you've had your own Karen, and hey, subscribe if you're into real stories about regular people trying not to lose their minds. So, yeah, Karen. I didn't know her name yet. I only knew her as the short-haired woman in the lemon-colored cardigan who lived directly behind me. She had a permanent scowl, like someone had stolen her parking spot 20 years ago and she never got over it. That first encounter should have been a warning, but I brushed it off. I even tried to laugh. I told her I'd be done in an hour, tops, and offered her a plate of ribs. She stared at me like I'd offered her poison. "I'm a vegan," she said, in that tone people use when they want you to know they're morally superior, not just plant-based. Then she marched off. 20 minutes later, 2 squad cars rolled up. I stood there, spatula in hand, with my nephew Evan, looking equal parts amused and mortified. He's 16, visits on weekends, and had just told me I finally seemed cool for owning a smoker. When the officers walked into my backyard, one of them sniffed the air and said, "That smells amazing. What kind of wood you using?" "Cherry with a touch of mesquite," I said. They told me they had to respond to a potential nuisance smoke complaint. I offered them ribs. They declined, professionally, but the one with the mustache winked at me and said, "Carry on, pitmaster." Still, it left a bad taste in my mouth, and not the hickory kind. The next day, I got a note on my door. "Please be advised that continued smoke disturbances may result in HOA action. Management." No name, no signature. Just the kind of passive-aggressive garbage that thrives in suburban neighborhoods like mold in a damp basement. I paced my living room, half laughing, half raging. I mean, wasn't this America? Wasn't BBQ basically a national pastime? Who complains about ribs? I wasn't throwing wild parties. No loud music, no fireworks, just me, Evan, a Bluetooth speaker on low, and a Weber that cost me more than my couch. I looked up the HOA bylaws just to be sure. There was a clause about nuisance smoke, but it was vague, buried between pool key rules and garbage bin protocols. It didn't ban grilling, just said you should minimize excessive emissions. Emissions. Like I was a coal plant. That's when I made the decision. Not a big one at first. Just a quiet, stubborn flick of the switch in my brain. I told Evan, "Next weekend we're doing it again." He grinned. "You serious?" "Yep, and we're inviting the neighbors." That part wasn't planned. It just popped out. But the moment I said it, something clicked. If Karen, or whatever her name was, wanted to go to war over some light barbecue smoke, I could fight back. Not with anger, not with lawsuits or petty vandalism. I'd fight with smoked brisket, lawn chairs, and perfectly balanced dry rubs. I printed up 5 little flyers and stuck them in mailboxes along my street. Backyard barbecue, free food, good vibes, all welcome. Saturday at 2 p.m., 1987 Sycamore Lane. BYOB, I'll bring the meat. It was low-key, I didn't expect much, maybe a few polite nods, maybe nothing. But that Saturday came and I fired up the smoker again. This time I added pork shoulder to the mix, bought extra buns, set up the fold-out table, even dusted off the cornhole set. Then something wild happened. People came. First was Amanda and Luis from 3 doors down, then the quiet couple with the toddler and the golden retriever, then a few college kids renting the house at the cul-de-sac's end. They brought homemade potato salad and a 6-pack of IPA. One guy offered to DJ from his phone. And just like that, the vibe shifted. From quiet suburb where people nod from driveways to something warmer, more alive. We laughed. We traded HOA horror stories. One guy, Steve, told me Karen once reported his garden gnome for public indecency. Apparently, it had a tiny ceramic butt crack. I scanned the fence line once or twice, wondering if Karen was watching from behind her blinds. At one point, I thought I saw her curtain twitch, but she didn't come out. That night, Evan helped me clean up. We sat on the back steps, finishing off the last of the ribs. He nudged me and said, "That was actually kind of epic." I nodded. "Think we should do it again next week?" His grin was answer enough. I didn't know it yet, but that one decision over smoke of all things was about to reshape everything. Not just my weekends, not just how the neighbors saw me, but how I saw myself. Because sometimes when someone tries to shrink your joy to fit their comfort zone, the best thing you can do is build a bigger table and keep the smoker going every single weekend. The second letter from the HOA arrived 3 days after my second cookout. This one wasn't handwritten or tucked under my doormat like a passive-aggressive love note. It was official, typed, formatted, and mailed. The envelope bore the HOA's full name, Sycamore Oaks Residential Committee, with one of those tiny embossed seals that tries really hard to look important. Inside it said, "We have received multiple complaints regarding excessive smoke originating from your backyard on weekends. Please be advised that repeated violations may result in fines. See subsection 14B regarding nuisance emissions and community enjoyment." Community enjoyment. That phrase stuck to me like old grease on a grill grate. I was pretty sure the 25 people who came last Saturday were enjoying themselves just fine. Karen? Probably less so. But apparently, community in HOA speak didn't mean most people. It meant whoever screams first. I called the HOA's number, got a voicemail. I emailed them. Crickets. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a discussion. This was a warning shot. A little taste of control wrapped in red tape. And I could practically hear Karen's voice behind it. Excessive smoke, they said. Fine, I'd give them something to talk about. That Friday, I went big. I rented a second grill from Home Depot, a huge charcoal barrel smoker, the kind that looks like it could power a battleship. I bought ribs, wings, sausages, and 2 pounds of brisket. I marinated for hours. I even made my own damn slaw. Evan brought over a Bluetooth speaker that looked like it belonged at Coachella, and I printed more flyers this time. 20. I walked the street like some kind of apron-wearing mailman, dropping off invitations with a smile. I knocked on doors. I said things like, "Just a little neighborhood thing," and "Come hungry." It worked. Word spread. By Saturday afternoon, my backyard like a block party without the block. People brought fold-out chairs, coolers, even tiki torches. Kids ran through sprinklers. Someone set up a card table with lemonade and chips. Steve, the gnome guy, showed up with a Bluetooth mic and started narrating the cornhole games like it was the Olympics. And the smoke? Oh, it rose. Thick and glorious, curling into the sky like incense at a backyard altar. You could smell it down the street. One guy from the next neighborhood over wandered in, beer in hand, saying, "Heard there was a thing." I brought brownies. Karen didn't come, but she made her presence known. At one point, Evan nudged me. "Dude, top window, 2 o'clock. I looked up. There she was, standing stiff at her bedroom window, arms crossed like she was keeping a mental file on all of us. For a second, I almost waved. Then I thought better of it. Let her stew. Because here's the thing about people like Karen. They don't just want quiet. They want control. It's not the noise. Not really. It's that someone else is deciding what joy looks like, and it doesn't include them. Later that night, I got another visit from the police. 2 new officers this time. One of them was younger, the other older and tired-looking. They stood at my gate, surrounded by the smell of grilled meat and the sound of teenagers trying to play Wonderwall on a borrowed guitar. "Hey," I said, walking over, wiping my hands on my apron. "Let me guess." "We got a complaint about smoke and possible unlawful assembly," the older one said, clearly bored. "Unlawful assembly? Is that what we're calling barbecues now?" He smirked. "You feeding everyone?" "Anyone with a plate and manners." He looked around. People were laughing, eating, playing cards. No chaos, no booze-fueled brawls, just community. Real community, not the fake, sterile kind HOAs like to reference in bylaws. "You're fine," he said, and then added quietly, "but maybe keep the smoke downwind next time. Some folks are sensitive." I nodded. "Appreciate it." As they walked away, the younger one turned and said, "You do this every Saturday?" "Thinking about it," he smiled. "Might bring my wife next time." After they left, I grabbed a rib, leaned against the fence, and exhaled. I wasn't trying to be a martyr or a rebel. I wasn't staging some civil disobedience campaign. But something about this whole thing, it felt bigger than smoke. There's this weird tension in neighborhoods like mine. Everyone pretends to be polite, but no one really knows each other. We wave, we nod, we mow our lawns on schedule, but until something pierces that surface, good or bad, it stays shallow. And sometimes the thing that cracks it open, it's not a natural disaster. It's not a shared tragedy. It's a plate of ribs and a common enemy named Karen. Evan caught me zoning out and said, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, just thinking about how weird it is. What? How something this small turned into all of this. He looked around, then shrugged. Maybe people were just waiting for someone to start it. The kid had a point. The next morning, I found a new note on my porch. Not from the HOA this time. It was handwritten, loopy cursive, on pale pink stationery. "Dear Mark, I understand you are new here and perhaps unaware of how things typically run in this community. I urge you to consider the effect your gatherings have on the rest of us who value peace, cleanliness, and respiratory health. I have contacted the HOA again and will continue to escalate this matter if necessary. Please be reasonable." That was the first time she signed her name. No, sincerely, no. Best regards. Just Karen. I stared at the note for a long time. Part of me wanted to crumple it and throw it on the grill out of spite, but I didn't. I pinned it to my fridge right next to Evan's report card and a pizza coupon. It wasn't just a letter. It was fuel, and I was just getting started. By the fourth weekend, it was no longer just a barbecue. It was an event. People started texting me, neighbors I hadn't met yet, or ones I'd only seen at a distance while dragging trash bins to the curb. "Hey, what time should we swing by? Can I bring my dad? You cool if I set up a volleyball net?" One guy even offered to bring a food truck. I said no, but still, a food truck. This was evolving faster than my old marriage. I didn't even need flyers anymore. The cookouts had gone viral, at least in our local bubble. My backyard transformed into a weekly ritual. Families showed up with blankets, teens came and hovered around the snacks. That quiet couple with the toddler, they brought bubble machines and baby sunscreen. Steve, the gnome guy, became our unofficial MC. Someone brought chalk for the driveway and drew Mark's Meat Church in big bubble letters. It was hilarious and a little surreal. 4 weeks ago, I was just a guy trying to learn how to cook a brisket without ruining it. Now I was basically hosting suburban Coachella every Saturday, and I hadn't spent a single cent on advertising. Karen, of course, was livid. At this point, she wasn't hiding behind curtains anymore. She stood in her yard with her phone out, taking videos. Once, she even came to the edge of my fence and just stared. Not said anything, just stared. It was kind of unnerving, like living next to a hawk that hated ribs. I saw her talking to one of the HOA board members the next morning. Bryce, a lanky guy in loafers and an ever-present Bluetooth headset. Bryce waved at me awkwardly when I passed by. Karen didn't. A few days later, I got another HOA notice. This one was longer. "Mr. Levin, we are formally requesting that you cease hosting large-scale gatherings in your backyard every weekend. We have received complaints regarding parking congestion, noise, and air quality. While community events are encouraged, they must be scheduled through the HOA and adhere to our guidelines. Failure to comply may result in fines or a temporary suspension of access to shared amenities." I laughed out loud. I didn't even use the pool. I showed the letter to Evan, who read it while chewing cereal. "Wait," he said. "Are they trying to ban you from the picnic tables now?" "I guess," I said, "if I keep committing acts of meat-based terrorism." That week, I doubled down. I borrowed extra folding tables. I bought clip-on string lights and hung them across the yard. A friend of Amanda's had a projector, and we set up a movie screen against my garage. After dark, the kids watched The Sandlot, while the adults passed around plates of pulled pork and traded stories. I started to notice something unexpected, though. It wasn't just that people were having fun. They were connecting. Neighbors who'd lived on the same street for years and barely spoken were now swapping gardening tips. One mom told me she hadn't seen her teenage son willingly talk to another human being in 3 months, until he helped set up a grill station with Evan. A couple people even started carpooling after meeting at one of the cookouts. It was as if the smoke had created a signal. It's okay to show up here. You're welcome. But for Karen, That signal must have felt like a fire alarm. The next week, she printed her own flyers. Seriously. Amanda handed me one that she found on her windshield. Black text, all caps, bold font like a missing person poster. Secondhand smoke is a health hazard. Weekly meat burning events at 1987 Sycamore are not only disruptive, but dangerous. Please contact the HOA and demand these gatherings be shut down before someone gets hurt. She even included links to articles about meat smoke causing cancer and a dramatic stock photo of someone coughing in a mask. I kept the flyer, taped it next to the other Karen note on the fridge. Part of me was annoyed, but another part of me almost impressed. She was committed. And truth be told, so was I. I didn't start this to be a hero. I wasn't trying to take a stand or stick it to the HOA. But once it started working, once I saw how hungry people were, not just for food, but for community, I couldn't stop. Because here's the quiet truth no one admits about suburban life. It's lonely. You can live 5 feet from someone's front door and not know their name. You wave out of obligation. You talk about mulch and weather. But real connection? It's rare. And when it shows up, messy, smoky, loud, it's easy to mistake it for a problem instead of a solution. Maybe that's what Karen was doing. Or maybe she really just hated fun. Hard to tell. One evening, after everyone had left and I was putting out the last of the citronella candles, Evan said, "Do you think she's going to snap?" "Who?" "Karen." I saw her watching the movie from her window. She had binoculars. I blinked. "Binoculars?" "Yup, like a whole wildlife setup." I shook my head. "What would she even do?" Evan shrugged. "What can she do?" That question stuck with me, because honestly, I didn't know. The HOA could find me, sure. Maybe even threaten legal action if Karen pushed hard enough. But something had shifted. I wasn't just hosting these events anymore. I was facilitating something people clearly wanted. And as more folks got involved, I noticed something curious. People stopped whispering about Karen. They started ignoring her. The gnome guy, Steve, joked one night that we should name a burger after her. The Karen, extra dry, no seasoning, and served cold. I laughed, but something about it felt off. Mean. I wasn't sure when the line blurred between standing my ground and just mocking her. And yet, I couldn't deny the momentum. The next Saturday, a band showed up. Not booked, not planned. Just a trio of guys who'd heard about the cookouts and thought it'd be fun to jam. They played old rock covers and some surprisingly decent originals. People clapped. Someone danced barefoot on the lawn. That night, as the last song echoed into the summer air, I leaned against the fence and took it all in. I never planned for any of this. But here we were. And I had a feeling the real showdown hadn't even started yet. I never saw it happen, but I heard it, loud and sharp like something had cracked. Not a bone or a plate, but something harder to fix, Karen's patience. It was the 6th Saturday, and the cookout was in full swing. We had over 40 people that day, some from streets I didn't even recognize. Someone's cousin brought a shaved ice cart. A pair of teenage girls sold bracelets they'd made, setting up a tiny table near the garden beds. It felt like a summer market. Even the air seemed different, less like rebellion, more like tradition. And that's when I heard it. A shout, followed by a crash, then silence. Not the kind of silence that follows a great song or a touching toast, but that still alert silence when something's wrong. I stepped away from the grill just in time to see Karen storming across my lawn, her phone clutched in one hand and a clipboard in the other. She was dressed in head-to-toe beige, the color of emotional constipation, and her eyes were wide like she hadn't slept. Everyone froze. The kids stopped running. The music died mid-song. The shaved ice guy turned off his motor. And then Karen started yelling, "This has gone far enough. This is a residential neighborhood. Do you even know how many codes you're violating right now? There are bylaws, air quality standards, vehicle congestion ordinances." No one responded at first. She turned to a group of teens and snapped, "Is this an unsanctioned sales table? Are your parents even here?" The girls just stared. Then Amanda walked up. Calm, measured. "Karen, maybe we can talk about this another time." "No, no more talking. I have reported this. I have documented this. And if the HOA doesn't do something, I will file a complaint with the city." She swung the clipboard around like it was Excalibur. "I have photos, names, license plates." Then she turned to me. "You," she hissed, "have completely disregarded the rules of this community, and I will not be bullied in my own neighborhood." There it was. That word. Bullied. I looked at her, really looked, and saw something I hadn't noticed before. Her jaw was trembling. Her eyes weren't just angry. They were glassy, like she'd been crying. For a moment, no one said anything. The entire backyard held its breath, and then Steve, bless him, took a step forward and asked, "Karen, do you want a burger?" It was so unexpected, so gentle, that it actually stunned her into silence. She blinked. "What?" "A burger," he said again. "There's veggie ones, too." And for half a second, it looked like she might break. Like maybe the wall would crumble and she'd just say yes, take the burger, and everything would soften. But she didn't. She turned, stormed back toward her yard, and slammed her sliding door so hard that the glass rattled. A toddler started crying. Someone muttered, "Well, that was dramatic," and a few nervous laughs broke out. But the mood didn't quite recover. I finished grilling. I played music. We tried to carry on, but Karen's outburst had taken the air out of the party like a slow leak in a balloon. People left earlier than usual. The laughs were quieter. The games felt shorter. After the last car pulled away, I sat with Evan on the porch. "She's going to go nuclear, isn't she?" he asked. "I think she already did." He was quiet for a while, then said, "I don't think it's really about the smoke." I looked at him. "No?" "No. I mean, yeah, maybe it started there, but did you see her face? That wasn't about brisket." He wasn't wrong. I spent the next day in a kind of daze, cleaning up, scrubbing grill grates, tossing out half-empty plates of potato salad. But my mind kept looping back to Karen's face, the way her voice cracked, the way she said bullied. It wasn't that I felt guilty exactly, but something had shifted. I had won the crowd, sure, but at what cost? That evening, I checked my email and found a long message from the HOA. Not a generic form letter, a direct one from Bryce. "Mark, I've received more complaints, and while I personally think your events are well-intentioned, we're at the point where escalation is inevitable. Karen has contacted city zoning enforcement, and a few other residents are starting to express concerns as well. I'd advise hitting pause for a few weekends until things cool off. Respectfully, a few other residents?" It was hard not to feel betrayed. Weren't these the same people who ate my ribs, used my folding chairs, laughed at Steve's gnome jokes? But again, maybe Evan was right. This wasn't about smoke anymore. This was about turf, power, loneliness, and somewhere deep in all of this, a woman who felt like her control was slipping away. That night, as I sat scrolling through photos from the cookout, the kids playing tag, the chalk drawings on the driveway, the guy playing acoustic covers on a milk crate, I felt something twist in my gut. What if we'd made her feel invisible? Not just excluded, but erased? It's a weird, uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the things we build to bring people together can unintentionally push others out. And as much as I wanted to be right, as much as I loved playing the role of the neighborhood rebel, I couldn't ignore the feeling that maybe Karen wasn't just a Karen. Maybe she was hurt, or scared, or just tired of being alone in a world that didn't wait for her anymore. So I made a decision. The next Saturday, I didn't fire up the grill. I didn't post about a party. I didn't set up tables. Instead, I walked next door and rang Karen's bell. She didn't answer. But I stood there anyway, heart pounding, ribs in a foil tray in my hands, because something told me this wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment it changed. She made me wait. Not for 5 seconds, not for a minute. I stood on Karen's porch with a tray of warm, foil-covered ribs in my hands for exactly 4 minutes and 23 seconds. Yes, I counted before the door creaked open a crack. She didn't unhook the chain. Just one eye peeked through, sharp and suspicious. "What do you want?" Her voice wasn't angry this time, just worn out, like a threadbare jacket that had been tugged in too many directions. I held up the tray. Peace offering. Silence. "They're smoked," I added, but respectfully smoked. Low wood, short fire, I promise. A breath. Then, "I'm vegan." "I remember," I said, nodding, "but I also brought grilled zucchini and portobellos." A longer silence. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You remembered?" I nodded again. "I also left out the honey glaze, just in case." She hesitated, then undid the chain and opened the door fully. Her living room behind her looked pristine, like a staged house from a real estate ad. No clutter, no noise, no signs of life. Just stillness. "Come in," she said, not warmly, but not coldly either. I stepped inside. She motioned to the table, and I set the tray down on a coaster like it might be radioactive. I'm not apologizing, she said, arms crossed, watching me. This whole circus has been completely out of control. I took a deep breath. I'm not here for an apology. She didn't reply, just stared like she was trying to figure out if this was some elaborate prank. I just wanted to talk, I said, not as HOA enemies or barbecue nemesis, just neighbors. She exhaled hard, like she'd been holding it in for weeks. I moved here 17 years ago, she said suddenly, back when people actually cared about keeping things clean, respectful, predictable. I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. My husband died 9 years ago. Lung cancer, never smoked a day in his life. She gave me a pointed look. He hated the smell of smoke, said it made him feel like his lungs were closing in. Ah, there it was. The real beginning of everything. I'm sorry, I said quietly. She didn't respond to that, just continued. He was a quiet man. We didn't have kids, just us. And when he passed, I kept the house exactly the same layout, same garden, same routines. I even keep his slippers by the bed. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. She looked at me with something that wasn't quite anger, more like exhaustion dipped in grief. And then one day, I smell this awful cloud floating through my window, and music, and people I don't know shouting and laughing like they own the place. And it keeps happening every Saturday. More noise, more smoke, more strangers. And suddenly I'm the crazy one for saying, hey, can we not turn this neighborhood into a tailgate party? I shook my head. You're not crazy. She gave a bitter laugh. That's not what your little fan club thinks. I winced. Yeah, about that. I sat down across from her, elbows on my knees. Look, Karen, I didn't set out to turn this into a war. I was just trying to do something to not feel so alone, honestly. After my divorce, I didn't really know anyone here. Evan, my nephew, comes over on weekends, and I wanted to create a space for him, for people, for connection. She eyed me warily. You think I don't want connection? No, I said. I think you used to, but maybe somewhere along the way you gave up on people coming to you. That hit harder than I intended. Her mouth pressed into a line. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table, and then softly, no one came to his funeral. My chest ached. Not even neighbors? She shook her head. They said they were busy, or didn't really know us. And after that, I guess I decided if people weren't going to show up, then I didn't want them at all. Better to be alone by choice than disappointed again. I got it. In a way, I didn't expect to, because loneliness doesn't always look like crying on the couch. Sometimes it looks like control, like HOA complaints and noise restrictions, like putting up fences that keep people out, but also keep you stuck inside. I don't hate you, Mark, she said finally. I looked up. I hated what you reminded me of, that the world moved on without me, that people gathered and laughed and lived, while I stood in the window with no one left to sit at my table. That image, that quiet house, the slippers, the empty chair, knocked the wind out of me. I'm sorry, I said again, this time really meaning it. We sat in silence for a while, not awkward, just human. Finally, I said, we're doing one more, just one more cookout before summer ends. She raised an eyebrow. I won't invite the whole neighborhood, no flyers, just a small one. Backyard, close friends. She narrowed her eyes. Define small. 10, 15 max. Maybe a cornhole board. Definitely grilled portobellos. She sighed, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. I'm not promising anything, she said. I'm not asking for that, I replied. Just letting you know you'd be welcome, anytime. For the food, or the company, or just to sit and not be alone. Karen didn't answer. She just looked at me for a long, searching moment. Then, wordlessly, she stood up and walked into the kitchen. A moment later, she returned with a faded photo in her hand. It was of her and her husband, young, smiling, holding hands at a picnic, a grill in the background, smoke rising, joy frozen in time. She placed it on the table between us. I used to like the smell, she said softly. Before it meant something else. I nodded. Maybe we can help it mean something new. She didn't smile, but she didn't say no either. And that somehow felt like a yes. The final cookout was quieter, like the closing scene of a movie where the chaos fades and the characters finally breathe. No flyers, no bands, no bounce house, just a circle of chairs, 2 grills, and people who genuinely wanted to be there. 15 guests, give or take. Enough for laughter, not enough for complaints. Steve brought his infamous no-made chili. Amanda brought her dad, who told me the same story about his motorcycle trip through Montana 3 times. I didn't mind. Evan handled the playlist. Acoustic, mellow, the kind of music you don't notice until you realize it's made everything feel better. And then just as the sun slipped behind the neighbor's roofline, she came. Karen. She didn't sneak in. She didn't hover by the fence. She walked up the driveway with a Tupperware container and a stare straight ahead. Not aggressive, not apologetic, just present. Every head turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. I stood up, wiping my hands on a towel, and met her halfway. Karen, I said. She held out the Tupperware like it was a peace treaty. Vegan brownies. I took them. Thank you. They're gluten-free too. Double threat. A few awkward chuckles fluttered around the yard, and then Amanda, bless her timing, said, "Oh wow, I love vegan brownies," like she just discovered fire. Karen didn't sit right away. She lingered near the grill, watching the smoke drift skyward. I could see it on her face, a cautious reckoning, like she was still deciding whether to forgive the flame or fight it. I handed her a plate. Grilled zucchini, portobello caps, charred corn. No meat in sight. She glanced at me. No ribs? Not tonight. Her brow lifted. I thought those were your specialty. They are, I said, but tonight's about making room for everyone. That seemed to land. Karen sat, and slowly the night unfolded. Not like the boisterous cookouts from before, but like a neighborhood exhale. Kids kicked a soccer ball. Steve taught someone how to toss a beanbag. Karen even complimented Amanda's shoes. I couldn't help but smile. At one point, I caught Karen staring at the yard, the string lights overhead, the plates and laughter, and the soft, slow music. She looked not happy, exactly, but softer, like a rusted hinge that had finally moved without screeching. She leaned toward me and said, "This isn't terrible." "I'll take it," I said. "High praise." She glanced at the sky. He would have liked this. I didn't ask who. I didn't have to. Probably would have hated the music, though, she added. He was a jazz guy. "I'll tell Evan to work in some Coltrane next time." She gave me a look. "Next time?" I shrugged. "Maybe not every Saturday, but we'll keep it going. Smaller, smarter, less smoke, more zucchini." Karen didn't answer, but she didn't say no either. That night, after everyone had gone, I stood at the edge of the yard and looked at the embers glowing in the grill. Evan came up beside me, sipping a soda. "So that was different," he said. "Yeah. You think she's going to go back to calling the HOA next week?" I smiled. "Nah, I think she needed to be seen, that's all." Evan nodded, like he understood more than a 16-year-old probably should. People act weird when they feel invisible. I looked at him. Yeah, they really do. He finished his soda and tossed the can into the recycling bin. "Still," he said, "can't believe she brought brownies." "She brought herself," I said. "That's bigger." We stood in silence for a bit, watching the stars blink on one by one. Before he headed in, Evan turned and said, "Hey, are you going to do ribs next week again?" I laughed. "Yeah, probably." "Cool," he said, "but maybe make a batch without meat, for her." Already planning on it. After he went inside, I walked back over to the grill and tossed on one last log, just enough to keep it warm, just enough to let the smoke rise again, not like a threat, but like an invitation. That's what I'd learned. Smoke can push people away, sure, but it can also bring them in if you're willing to control the burn. Karen had started out as the enemy in this story, the kind of neighbor people whisper about and avoid, but now she was something else entirely. A woman who loved someone deeply and lost him. A woman who tried to preserve what she had left by pushing everything else out, until one day the world pushed back with ribs, cornhole, and accidental community. She didn't need fireworks or food trucks or 50 people dancing in her backyard. She just needed to be invited. And sometimes that's all any of us need. The next morning I found a note tucked under my doormat. Neat cursive. Pink stationery. "Thanks for the grilled mushrooms. And for not giving up on me before I stopped giving up on myself. Let me know if you ever want to try jazz night. I still have his records." Karen, I smiled, taped it to the fridge, right next to the flyer she made, the HOA letter, and the original smoke complaint. A little scrapbook of how two people clashed and cooked their way into understanding. Because sometimes the best way to build peace in a neighborhood isn't to avoid conflict, it's to light the grill anyway and set an extra plate.